I tried cooking for the first time ever at 2 a.m. It was 2 a.m. on a Monday. I had to get up for school in 6 hours, but I couldn't fall asleep and I was hungry. I've never once cooked a meal before, but my mother showed me how to every once in a while. My mother was somehow still awake at 2 a.m. today, so I decided to ask her to cook me some instant noodles. She said that she was too tired to cook and decided to leave it to me, someone who has no experience cooking at all, to cook instant ramen using a gas stove. Our gas stove is really old, so sometimes it doesn't respond properly, but I thought that even though I was sleepy, hungry, and working with little to no knowledge and an old gas stove, I could at the very least cook some instant ramen. I tried to turn the gas stove on slowly, but ended up not lighting a flame. I, however, soon heard a click and then panicked as I saw no flames. I tried to slowly turn it off, but it didn't turn off. I had left the gas stove on without flames, yet I didn't even realize it. I thought I had turned it off, but then I started to smell something weird, and that should have immediately told me that something was very wrong. However, being the complete moron I was, I thought it was just the water I'd been heating on a water heater. I went to go investigate my water heater thinking that perhaps it malfunctioned. But no, it wasn't that it was gas from the gas stove. I, however, being the moron I was, didn't even consider the possibility of that. If it weren't for my mother who smelled it and decided to investigate, I could have potentially died from carbon monoxide poisoning today. Today I am absolutely flabbergasted, stunned, and disappointed at my utter stupidity and idiocy. I am now deeply anxious and swore to myself that if I ever decided to cook again in the future, I'll hire a professional chef as well as several safety measures to oversee me. I messed up by deciding it was a good idea to cook for the first time ever at 2 a.m. on a Monday. I left the gas stove on without flame and didn't even realize it. I could have been in some serious harm if my mother didn't smell the gas. Story number 2. My girlfriend finally farted in front of me. For a long time, my girlfriend, 19, would always say she'll finally be fully comfortable with me, 20, when she farts in front of me. So yesterday we're just chilling and my stomach is feeling kind of funny cause we had drank like 7 cans of beer and 3 tequila cocktails between us, and then ate Chinese food at the concert we were coming from. So my stomach is feeling funny, and I'm like, babe, I need to fart. She playfully fuses for a bit, but I convince her in the end. Then I just let it rip. I had been keeping it for hours. But it was just loud and long, but smell-wise, it didn't really pack a punch. It was all bark, no bite. So we forget about and move on. Now, like 10 minutes later, as I'm about to go out, I just catch a whiff of something in air. Oh God, it was putrid. It was pungent, like acidic, but with a hint of death and rotting things, then add typical fart smells in there. My head was like, this is what gas chambers must have felt like back when the world was ugly. Thank God we as humanity decided not to do that anymore. Oh my, it was terrible. It made my eyes water. My left nostril blocked and I could feel like it was working its way down to my stomach. I was like, babe, did you just fart? She then cracked an embarrassed smile and said, yes, babe. I was like, oh God, you are horrible, WTF. This isn't what I thought when I was saying you can fart. I thought you'd toot like a cartoon princess or something. TF is this biological chemical shit. Are you trying to suffocate me? The mosquitoes are literally dying. Look at them fall from the ceiling. Jesus, babe, what's wrong with you? I then opened the window. I had the craziest revelation ever when I felt that sweet release of fresh air going into my lungs. I finally understood why the Bible always contrasts good and evil in their stories. Like, why does God create the devil if he's so perfect? Why is there evil and chaos in the world? It finally made sense what Jordan Peterson was saying in his philosophical Bible lectures, that you can't appreciate good unless it's contrasted with evil. In Genesis they say, and he saw that it was good after creating because it's comparative to the chaos before that God then turns into order. So it's like to the story, you can never appreciate how good air is until you smell this nuclear war fart. Death gas chamber type beat women are crazy, wake up the dead type fart. Anyway, she real goofy, but I love her. Story number 3. Loving my life as an independent 30-year-old. I'm finally seeing progress in my mental health after therapy. I'm writing this for myself. I'm proud of how far I have come. I am learning to deal with my emotions a lot better than before, and want to write about my happiness thoughts too, not just things that upset me on here. I am working on minimalism in regards to my place. I am a lot happier with less things and more quality items. I run the humidifier in my rooms at night, and it feels like such a breath of fresh air. I have learned that although I don't like being cold, I thrive more in chilly areas, so keep the fans on for a slight breeze. I am also drinking lots of more water. I still love my wine, but I now require myself to drink double the water before a drinking night and cut out drinking on any night before my work nights and school and feel more active. I only go places to hang out that are planned unless it's an immediate family emergency, which helps me save gas and lowers my cravings for spending money. I only eat fast food 2 times a month to save money and eat lots of more healthy foods before and after fast foods to keep my mind focused. I am reading books about improving my mental health, and I am just loving everything about how far I have come, but don't have anyone to tell without feeling like I'm making things only about me. That is all, and I hope everyone is having a great night. Story number 4. On the last day of 5th grade, the teachers let the boys go into the girls' bathroom and girls go into the boys' bathroom. When I was in grade school, there was always this curiosity about the girls' bathroom because we were not allowed to go in there. We always wondered what it was like. At the time, we were too young to figure out that it's the same as the boys' bathroom, but without urinals. So on the very last day of 5th grade before summer break, the teachers told everyone that the boys could go into the girls and the girls could go into the boys. We were like, wow, really? I can actually go in. So I went over to the girls' bathroom where this was going down. A teacher was standing outside the bathroom. I asked him if I could go in, and he said, sure, go ahead. So I went in, and of course it was very underwhelming. All there was a few stalls, some sinks, and a couple trash cans. I walked out thinking, okay, that was stupid. It's just like ours. But the girls were like, hey, you guys got these things on the wall that you can piss into. We don't have those. I suppose the reason why the teachers did this was so that boys won't go into middle school still having this curiosity about the girls' bathroom. They wanted to put an end to it right then and there. Story number 5. Someone from a few years ago. When I was younger, I had a friend. It's more accurate to say that she's my childhood friend. She's 6 wires older than me. Whenever she and her mom visits, she always plays with me. As I was still a kid, I saw her as an older sister. She taught me how to make origami, more specifically paper cranes, which she was good at. When I was 14, that's when she started dragging me around to go shopping or eat somewhere with her. That time, she was already with a guy she's been dating since she was 15. I knew that I felt something for her, but I could never say it. Maybe I was scared that if I said it out loud, she would stop holding my hand, stop taking me to places she likes, stop telling me about the things that she finds interesting or things that she finds beautiful. I knew nothing would happen even if I said it, because I was 14 and she was 20. I was nothing more than a kid brother to her. Whenever she was feeling kinda down, she'd randomly give me a flower from her mother's garden. It was always a daisy. I asked why it was always a daisy, and she'd say something like, we have lots of daisies, Mom wouldn't know if one of them was picked. She also loves putting flowers on her braided hair. It was like an Instagram thing, only it wasn't the days of Instagram. My 18th spring, she said she was going to get married 2 months later and wanted me to be the first one to know. I didn't know how to feel. I wanted to be happy for her, so I faked a smile and said, congratulations. I hope she didn't notice. A few weeks before her wedding day, I told her I liked her, but she only gave me a sad smile and said, thank you. I went to her wedding ceremony, just because my parents and older siblings told me to, but I didn't stay for the celebration. It's been years since I thought about this. Now that I think about it, the wind was cold on the day that I confessed. Even now, I still doubt that my decision of confessing to her was right. I could have just lived without telling her, and eventually forgetting her. I moved out of town when I went to college. I heard that she now has 2 kids, twins, and she's living a very happy life. I haven't seen her for 7 wires now, and I'm starting to forget what she looks like. Again, I still doubt that telling her was the right decision. It's the doubt that strains my mind. Story number 5. My bad experience with an online friend. I used to go on YouTube streams with a small amount of viewers and say I would subscribe if they did so and so, usually would lead to a punchline. One day I stumbled on this group of people with their own Minecraft SMP. They were all cool and fun, and I ended becoming friends with almost all of them on Discord. At some point, I got really depressed and decided to delete my Discord account, among others, meaning I would only be able to talk to these kind folks on streams twice a week. This will be important later. One day, I was on one of the members' streams, and me and him got on the topic of music. I said how fun it was to make circus music. The dude replied that he wanted to hear the circus music I made. I said, I'll upload it to my, now deleted, YouTube channel when I'm done. I wasn't open to creating another Discord account. The dude, for some reason, didn't reply to that comment. I was one of the only people on his stream, so it's not like it was easy to miss. At this point, I had to go, and before saying bye, he suggested that we find a time to make music together. At first, I was confused. I don't have Discord, remember? I thought to myself. Then the thoughts got more serious. Does he want my personal email or something? My phone number? He knows I'm not an adult. I was 16. BTW. I didn't tell him how old I was, but from my humor, everyone knew I was far from an adult. I started freaking out and sick fantasies of him hacking into an account of mine, and finding my address went through my head. I wasn't the most mentally stable person at this time, feeling equal sign reality for me. I was wondering if I should report him to Twitch, tell my parents, etc. In the end, all I did was delete every single social media account I had left, cutting myself off from every online friend in the SMP I had made. I'm older now, and this story confuses me. Was he even dangerous at all? I know he wouldn't have found my address, but did I have a reason to be afraid? Moral of the story: don't get too attached to people online, especially if you're under 18. Story number 7. I may have met the devil last night. So first off, this is a very long, detailed story. I apologize, as this is exactly how it happened, step by step. So, for context, I live in northern Michigan, and it has been chilly the past couple nights. Anyhow, my wife's car windows rolled down and haven't been able to roll back up, and I could not let that fly as my wife uses her car to carry the kids around. So, I went to my nearest parts store that was supposed to close about an hour after I left my house. It's a 36-minute drive from my house to there. I got there at about 9:30, so I get to the parts store and got the part. It did not work as the windows still were down. So I called my wife and told her I was just going to chill for a little bit and let the heat blow on me until I started the half-hour drive home in the cold. While I was waiting, the employee came out after having closed the shop about 10:04 and was kind of like, "Oh yeah, that sucks, man, good luck," and left. I was the only vehicle in the parking lot, and it suddenly got eerily quiet in the area, a pretty big city that usually has quite a bit of traffic as it goes through a popular Michigan tourist attraction. Out of the blue, in the still warm vehicle, the window begins to develop a light fog, as if condensation had gotten through the window seal and was just sticking, and I began to ever so slightly see my breath, and the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. A feeling I have ever experienced truly one other time when I was hiking the Washington State and came across a MTN lion on the trail. A man walked out from around the corner of the building, about 5'8" minus 5, 10 inches tall. He walked past the car and came to my side of the car, and from what I could see in the dark, he had a pretty tan complexion, and I wouldn't say a very handsome-looking guy, but not ugly either. He said, "Oh, looks like you're having some car trouble. Care if I take a look?" I told him I didn't care, as there isn't really anything he could do that I haven't tried already being this late at night. It was now about 10:08, as I hopped out, and he got in the driver's seat, jiggled some wires, hummed this ominous song to himself, said, "I'm gonna need you to trust the process," got out and slammed the door very hard, mind you, and rolled the windows up. I asked him if he needed a ride, and he said, "As a matter of fact, yeah, I do. I need to go to the corner of so-and-so roads." We climbed in the car, and it was the most ominous ride I have ever been in my life. He said maybe 3 things to me. He mentioned how he was a traveler, and that he was just passing through, how he has always brought good luck to people who are strangers to him, when the need a little pick-me-up, and how he got a call from someone to meet him at the road that I'm dropping him off at. The whole time we drove, the traffic was non-existent. The traffic lights were all blinking yellow, which isn't really that strange looking back at it now. I dropped him off. He said thanks, got out, and I smoked a cigarette as he walked away, and after I finished my cigarette, I drove in the direction he went and had no sight of him, and all the traffic in town was now back and passing through. The chill in the air was gone, and the hairs on my neck finally settled down. I asked him if he needed a ride, and he said, As a matter of fact, yeah, I do. I need to go to the corner of so-and-so roads. We climbed in the car, and it was the most ominous ride I have ever been in my life. He said maybe 3 things to me. He mentioned how he was a traveler and that he was just passing through, how he has always brought good luck to people who are strangers to him, when the need a little pick-me-up, and how he got a call from someone to meet him at the road that I'm dropping him off at. The whole time we drove, the traffic was non-existent. The traffic lights were all blinking yellow, which isn't really that strange looking back at it now. I dropped him off. He said thanks, got out, and I smoked a cigarette as he walked away. And after I finished my cigarette, I drove in the direction he went and had no sight of him. And all the traffic in town was now back and passing through. The chill in the air was gone, and the hairs on my neck finally settled down. Story number 8. Really would appreciate advice on this. I'm being 100% honest on the details, so please, I need some theories or best guesses for what transpired venting. So I'm a 31-year-old male, and this story happened a few years ago. She was like 2 years younger than me, but the age is irrelevant. Anyways, I met this girl at work, and I was immediately attracted to her. She was the cute, nerdy-looking type, and IDK, I just really dig that. Also, her personality character was so easygoing and laid back. In fact, she was so nice and the least confrontational person you'd ever met. She eventually opened up to me that her whole life she hated when people took advantage of her kindness and walked all over her, so to speak. She made it clear that was one of the reasons she liked me so much. I was one of few who didn't use that against her. This specific detail is so paramount to describe the rest of this story. So we began talking a lot at work, and I was nervous to ask her to hang out. Not sure why, usually I'm not this way. Especially when I think the feeling is mutual. However, this other dude at work who I really hated, very selfish and narcissistic, also liked her and would ask her to chill every night. I found this out and got bummed because he stated the two had previously hung out the other night. Anyway, we all 3 are standing there cleaning up the restaurant about to go home, and he asks her again to hang out, and she reluctantly agreed. Soon after, she blurts out, "Hey Taylor," me, "do you want to come hang out with us tonight?" And shocked, I said I don't know, I'm probably good, but thanks anyways. So I'm about to leave, and she pulls me aside and says, "Please come chill. He is so persistent and rude, and I don't want to hang with him alone." Now after hearing that, I said, sure, absolutely. We exchanged numbers, and I went home to shower and change clothes. Hearing this made me feel more excited and confident about pursuing her now. I show up, and Reed, the other dude, didn't know I was actually coming, and his whole demeanor changed when I walked in, presumably because he wanted to get with her and realized that wasn't likely to happen now. So we all chill and listen to music for a bit. Nothing crazy. About midnight, she says she needs to go to bed as she had nursing school in the morning. She kept saying sorry for kicking us out, even though I had absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. But Reed kept begging to stay overnight S&D, how she can just skip class tomorrow as it's college. Despite her not having to feel 1 ounce of sympathy for her decision, I could see she still felt bad about it. Eventually he gets the hint, and we head to our cars, and he didn't seem too happy I tagged along, or so he called it. I didn't want to throw Elisa under the bus, so I just said, "Oh, my bad." But in actuality, he can get fucked. Lol. About 2 minutes later, I get a text from Elisa. "Hey, if you want to come back over, you totally can. Just park down the street in case Reed circles back. IDK about him, haha. But if not, that's okay too." I didn't know what to say, so I messaged back this. "Hey, I mean, I'd love to, but I don't want to keep you up if you have school in the morning. No need to feel bad about that." She responds, "LOL, yeah, but it's Friday tomorrow and I don't have class until 10:30. Just didn't mention that detail to Reed." I literally did laugh out loud to receiving that and said, "Well, shit, yeah, I'll go park somewhere and text you when I'm walking into your building." She said, "Perf, see you soon." Now, by our messages, it was clear her and I both felt a certain way about one another, and it felt great. I'll fast forward through the story now, but wanted to explain that first night between us. We did end up hanging out together quite often from that point forward, and she had to lie almost every night to Reed as to why she couldn't hang out with him. I absolutely loved it because that dude was just a complete tool through and through. Eventually, he figured out we were getting close because we didn't care to hide it at work, and he begrudgingly moved on. But yeah, the next few months were amazing. We had so much in common and we're just really on the same wavelength when it came to expressing ourselves to each other. Eventually, one night after I got home from her house, I just told her that I thought she was special and was hoping to make us official, and she messaged back that the feeling was definitely mutual. But with her trying to graduate, she'd rather wait on that commitment until after her schoolwork was finished. Obviously, I completely understood that and was more than happy to just be content with where things were. Eventually, school ended and summer was about to begin, and she said she had to talk to me. I was worried, but found out she didn't want to end things, but didn't have the heart to tell me earlier that for the last 4 years, she goes back home to Minnesota in the summer and works at Valley Fair. This was only from early June to early August, so not the entirety of the summer, but a good portion. It sucked to hear, but I understood why she didn't tell me earlier, as I was so excited to have summer arrive so we could be more free and less bogged down with priorities. This isn't where I tell you she made that whole thing up. She was texting me a lot the first week or so FRKM her at her job. She definitely did work at that amusement park. But eventually we texted less and less to the point I didn't hear from her for a few days at a time. I was confused and a bit shocked, but figured all will be fine, just stay patient. But what happened was, I eventually couldn't get her to respond. Calls, texts, nothing. I was very worried at that point, so I reached out to her friend and asked if she heard from her recently, and the friend confirmed she did the previous day. I just sent her a last message and explained how I didn't know why or what the problem was, but that I just would love to hear back from her, and that if she wanted to move on, then that was her decision. But adamantly, I expressed her to please respond. She never did. Never. I moved on and eventually found out one day she deleted me on Facebook. Now I was really confused and at a complete loss for words. I messaged her on FB pleading to hear an explanation as to why she felt the need to do that, and that if I did something wrong or hurt her to at the very least, identify what it was. Again, nothing. Didn't even open the message. Now the story is almost done. But one last bombshell. I worked at a restaurant downtown that got a lot of business, and one night she came in with a different dude and I was her server. She couldn't believe it, but did her best to not make it obvious to her friend that her and I definitely knew each other. Eventually the check was asked and I dropped it off, and before walking away I said, "Thanks guys. Hope you have a great rest of your evening, especially you, Elisa." And I walked away. I eventually would look back and she was hurrying out the door in tears from that. What in the fuck do you guys think happened that caused whatever completely change her? Your guess is as good as mine. Story number 9. The situation that made me paranoid forever. Throwaway act cues. This shit's too deep for Maine. Not having many friends in college, I went to Tinder thinking it was a harmless fix to the loneliness, but I'll just say it complicated the loneliness to an unbearable degree. I met a guy and we hit it off immediately. Our first date was smoking a blunt and making out on the roof of the campus parking structure. We had a few other memorable dates to follow, but I had one class crush taking up way too much brain space to commit and felt bad, and just wasn't ready for a relationship, so I told him the latter part. He took it hard, and I regretted saying it when I saw how much he actually cared. I wish I had known, but he stopped talking to me. Scene change. My lab partner. He likes the same mainstream artists and honestly gorgeous eyes, but for the sake of our mutual work and being nervous as hell, I don't bother with getting too personal. When I got his number to coordinate the class project, I saw he had the same area code as the Tinder guy, because I have too much time to think. I always wondered if they ever passed in the hallway at school, if fate had lined them up too. But it's like God was eavesdropping. A few classes before we presented our final, I get a text from the Tinder guy. So, lab partner. My stomach just sunk, man. They were childhood best friends and committed to college and roomed together before. Out of the 15K or more people at this school, why this luck? I didn't even have that many friendships or good relationships before, so the idea my crush and my hookup were having in-depth convos about me as childhood best friends made me feel so violated. I didn't want anyone to really know me. The horrible feeling stayed, and I'd already volunteered to be the first speaker of our presentation. On top of the presentation, anxiety and his eyes on me too, knowing I fucked his best friend, I just couldn't speak a word. It was all incoherent. A room of 40 people was bad enough, but he was the scariest audience member to be watched by. I somehow said enough for the next person to get their cue to speak. I fought through Q&A too when I so heavily should have stayed quiet. It was maybe the quality of someone blacked out. Terrible. After the presentation, my crush just left the room without speaking a word to me. That was the last I ever heard from his blue eyes, except Tinder guy said he moved off campus and changed majors. I stayed with the Tinder guy a while casually, developed deep feelings, and said I loved him, though he didn't reciprocate. I always wondered WTF they made of this. It felt so eerie to just have lab partner vanish, then have his best friend inside me. I had to leave just so the emotions from it all didn't eat me alive. Even though I consciously long for the Tinder guy now, and my class crush is like a banned, horrible memory I can't picture romantically or sexually, he's the only one of them that's shown up in my dreams. In one IDKY, I opened my shirt to show him my boobs and he didn't react, just politely walked away. Another, I was taking a photo with him on a random grassy hill, and I remember feeling crazy when he put his arm around me, like a moment I'd longed for forever and finally got. My luck was so horrible in this situation, I just wanted to go away. Well, anyways. Story number 10. The pain of indulging in a naive fantasy. I was 25 and living in San Antonio, working in an Air Force cognitive modeling, human performance lab. This was late 2005. MySpace was at its peak, but there was also a relatively popular site called LiveJournal, which emphasized written journal posts over photos. Having a social media presence on the internet didn't necessarily conflict with anonymity yet. When I was getting into the internet in the late 90s, Rule #1 was to never post your real name or any identifying information online. This tenet went hand in hand with what made the internet so weird and chaotic and fun back then. I think it also helped people maintain an important separation between their online personas and their real-world egos. It wasn't expected, much less required, that people identify themselves to use social media platforms. But that's a whole other topic. The point is that the internet was 1000x more interesting back then, and we all took the luxury of anonymity for granted. I was just as much an introvert then as I am now, but I hadn't yet become so comfortable in my own skin that I could easily go out and engage with others. All of the people that I really liked around there were doctors, 40-ish plus years old and married. They didn't really go out. I didn't really want to go out. Most of my social explorations beyond the mundane took place online. I found a lot of satisfaction in having esoteric conversations with strangers I'd never meet at 2 a.m. over AIM or Yahoo Messenger or some online game. Occasionally, there would be this escalating sense of exhilaration when someone would start dropping hints to their real-life identities and hints at wanting to be known. Like I said, we took anonymity for granted, so there was a significance to someone sharing a real name or photo. Dancing around things like that could be pretty mysterious and exciting. I used to like posting things I'd written on LiveJournal. It seemed like there was still a lot of engagement on written posts back then. Of course, now people go straight for the photos and may or may not even notice written posts. I've learned that if I want anyone to read anything I have to say on Facebook, I'll need to insert a photo of my dog or bunny. Anyway, late 2005, a person I'd never spoken with started posting comments on my back catalog of LiveJournal entries. I had no idea who she was or how she came across my page, so I got curious and looked into hers. Her life seemed to be much more salacious and interesting than mine. Her journal entries detailing a series of parties and adventures and occasional sexual encounters, once with a guy, the rest with other girls. Her writing style was frenetic, her vernacular hip. She wrote like someone with total self-confidence, whose least concern was how she might be perceived by a reader, but also appeared to be quite well read. I was immediately both excited and puzzled by her seeming interest in my journal. I offered my thoughts and comments on several of her posts. She asked for my IM name, and that was that. We talked with each other constantly whenever both of us were at home. There were no smartphones, so we both had to actually be home to IM. For some reason, she was just as curious about me and my thoughts as I was about her and hers. I learned that her name was Mika, and that she was a student at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas. I learned that she was originally from Italy, that she was a lesbian, that she could introduce me to all kinds of excellent new music, about her philosophical explorations, and about her family. She seemed to be drawn to my introspective nature, making a point of distinguishing between it and the egocentric nature of the people in her social circle. We'd sit up all night talking, night after night, and would apparently think about each other while off on our daily routines. Mindful of her stated sexual preferences and the reality of distance, I didn't initially let myself get carried away with any sort of romantic interest, such an easy thing to do when getting to know what someone presents online, and I tried to temper my enthusiasm about engaging with her. I was still a little puzzled by her interest in me, and wasn't ready to take it for granted. In December of 2005, as I was preparing to leave for a trip out of state to spend Christmas with a friend, she expressed sadness and disappointment over not being able to stay in such frequent contact with me during my trip. To my surprise, she also expressed developing feelings for me, which she was a bit confused by but also excited about. The excitement was, to say the least, mutual. Over the couple of weeks that I spent visiting my friend, Mika and I would still exchange long email chains. I'd sit up writing to her while my friend was sleeping. She sent me photos so that I could finally put a face to all of the words she'd shared over the prior months. I found her wildly attractive. I was cautious about expressing my affections toward her, or letting my own imagination get carried away with them. I didn't want to make the mistake of presumption, but where I was hesitant, she was aggressive. She wanted my attention. She wanted my affirmation. She claimed second-guessing behaviors that would have given her no pause in the past for fear of diminishing my opinion of her. Of course, there was no risk of that because I was so enamored. So you can imagine my elation when she insisted that I come stay with her in Las Vegas over her spring break. I made plans. The next few months were probably typical of many new internet romances, superfluous affection, occasional misunderstandings followed by warm resolutions, curiosity, and drilling down into differing perspectives and ideals. I was still confused by her interest in me, though. I tried to avoid seeking explanations and reassurances, but I felt insecure because I thought that she was way too hot and her life way too exciting for her to be interested in an average-looking ginger working in a research lab. About a month before I was planning to go visit her, though, was the first incident to make me feel nervous, I guess. After months of extensive daily contact, Mika just seemed to vanish for a few days. And after a day, my anxiety was escalating by the hour. I was afraid that this idea of a person who'd absolutely filled my mind and heart for almost 6 months had decided on a whim to move on. So when she reached out again after about a week, according to my old emails, I was very frustrated but tried my best not to express it. And she was equally apologetic, describing some sort of health crisis with her grandmother and having to make an emergency trip to California. I was more than eager to accept the anesthetic of her apology, followed by her exclamations of affection and having missed me, and so on. But as the time for our planned visit drew closer, complications began arising in her life. Aside from her grandmother's illness, her mother decided to divorce her father. Her sister became pregnant, and her family was going to be moving back to Italy. She had to call off the spring break visit, and I was vocal about my frustration at that. But she was generous with the reassurances that her feelings for me had not changed and that we would still have our visit. Sometime later, I suggested that she come to visit me once her school semester finished, and she seemed enthusiastic about that. I was happy. She seemed happy. It seemed like we might yet have an opportunity to see what it was like actually being around each other in person. I bought her a plane ticket. I scheduled time off from work. I got us tickets to see a band I knew she liked that would be performing in town, bought food she liked, excessively cleaned my apartment, etc. We gushed at each other about our anticipation up until it was time for her to head to the airport. And then I spent the whole evening as a ball of nerves, having no idea what to do when actually confronted with this girl I was crazy about. But then I received an IM from her. She wasn't on the plane. She hadn't left. I mean, I'm sure that's no surprise to anyone reading this, but it surprised me. It did, and it didn't, because while I was naive, I still hoped. So when I heard the unique chime of her IM blast out of my desktop speakers and wake me up 2 hours before she was due to land, I felt a shock, and then a wave of despair as my heart sank. Because I knew what it meant before I even got up to look at the message. Apologies, a story about an angry ex catching her literally on her way out the door, an emotional confrontation. This ex filled her head with doubts about us, and she was upset, but again sought my forgiveness and wanted to keep talking. I was angry and perplexed. I accepted the apologies because I was desperate to maintain my own hope that it wasn't all bullshit, despite how much it felt like bullshit. Over the following weeks, our exchanges, we alternated in our roles of being the one seeking reassurance versus the one expressing doubt. Imagine intersecting waves, where the more one of us expressed a desire to keep trying to maintain a connection of hope for a relationship, the other would express frustration and exhaustion. Periodically, when moving from a peak to a valley, or vice versa, we'd meet in the middle of extremes and share a sentiment of contentment with each other. Eventually, Mika decided that she would move to Italy over the summer to stay with her family, but that she wanted me to come spend some time with her there to see how things felt, to see if we could work together. I was nervous and doubtful, but she seemed incredibly optimistic about it. She insisted that moving back there would allow her to re-establish perspective, and she described a hope that if things went well between us there, she could see herself moving back to the US to stay with me. The prospect of it was all so fantastic and fulfilling to me, completely overwhelming my sense of skepticism. I'm sure it's obvious where this is going. She wanted me to be there for my birthday at the end of July. We planned out a 2-week trip. I bought a round-trip plane ticket to Rome. She said she'd told her family about me and that they were excited for the visit. Plans, plans, plans. All the months of mixed anxieties and anticipation. It felt like we'd finally overcome all of the interloping circumstances and things were about to become real. The date of my flight arrived. Mika gave me instructions for where to go upon arrival to meet her and her mother. I had a backpack and 2 heavy suitcases, one filled with 2 weeks' worth of clothes, and the other mostly filled with gifts for Mika and her family. And as I settled into my seat on the plane, I was filled with a sense of hope and confidence, more than enough to suppress the little voice of doubt that had been plaguing me since the first canceled visit. After a 14-hour flight, I arrived in Rome, waded through the crowds of the airport to get through customs, picked up my luggage, and headed toward the pickup curb outside of the international terminal to finally meet Mika. I didn't see her. I figured she might be running behind, but then it occurred to me that she may have gone to the domestic terminal by mistake. So I hauled my backpack and 2 loaded suitcases across the airport and down a level to that curb. No one seemed to be waiting for me there either. Then I got nervous thinking that she may have just been late after all and was perhaps now in front of the international terminal, so I ran back there again. No one was looking for me. I sat there for a while scrutinizing every vehicle or person that passed by. I was still so certain that it must have been a mistake or misunderstanding, and that any moment she was going to call out to me from the other direction. I still just couldn't conceive of the alternative, because there I was, for real in Rome. It then occurred to me that perhaps she'd emailed me after I left to give me some sort of updated directions. Again, there were no smartphones yet, so I realized I'd have to go back into the terminal to find an internet kiosk if I wanted to check email. I was worried, though, that if I went in to do that, she might show up and, not finding me there, think that I'd gotten cold feet or something. I decided to risk it, though. This entailed first exchanging some dollars for euros so that I could pay for the internet kiosk, which was not cheap at all, and again required hauling a lot of luggage around the airport some more. Eventually, I managed to get online and found nothing. To my further despair, I had no telephone number for her in Italy. All I could do was send her an email asking for directions. So I spent that afternoon making trips back and forth between the kiosk inside of the terminal and the pickup curb. I have no idea how many times. There was no response to the emails. It got dark outside. I was absolutely exhausted. But I kept hoping that in just the next moment I'd see her waving at me from some oncoming vehicle. Eventually, wearing my backpack, sitting on top of my suitcases, I just fell asleep. I woke up early the next morning as the traffic started picking up on the curb. I went back inside to check email one more time. Nothing, of course. I had no idea what to do. I should note that I didn't speak Italian at all, which made asking for directions of any sort a challenge unto itself. I found a taxi driver and somehow conveyed to him that I needed a place to stay, so he took me to some motel on the outskirts of the city and charged me a ridiculous fee because I clearly had no idea what I was doing. I checked in and passed out immediately. When I woke up much later that evening, I made an obscenely expensive international phone call to my parents. They travel all the time, so I figured my mom would be able to give me some direction. She was shocked and worried, to say the least, when I explained that I was calling from Rome, where I was apparently stranded. But God bless her, she knew what to do. She used a pile of her accumulated travel points to get me a reservation at a hotel in the city that would be much more accommodating to my English-speaking ass. It wasn't going to be cheap, though. On top of that, my flight back to the U.S. was 2 weeks away. I hadn't budgeted for 2 weeks of hotel expenses in Rome, nor did I want to stay. My only affordable option, though still incredibly expensive, was to move my flight up a week and pay an exchange fee. So I was stuck there for a week. I was stuck in a city on the other side of the world by myself, where I knew no one, and couldn't communicate with anyone other than a few members of the hotel staff. Nearly a year's worth of anticipation and hope had suddenly turned into this knot of lead and fractured glass right in the middle of my heart. The sense of betrayal was so far beyond anything I was familiar with that I just couldn't even wrap my head around it. And I didn't want to try. I didn't want to acknowledge the reality of the situation as I was stuck in the middle of it. I didn't want to be awake or even aware. I wanted my mind to go blank. Everything about it was a blank. I couldn't enjoy going out to see the city because I couldn't stop thinking about how much I wanted to be seen. I didn't want to leave the hotel room because I was terrified that if I did, she might show up and I'd miss her. Whenever I'd sleep, I'd keep having these restless dreams of her knocking on the hotel room door or calling from the lobby, apologizing for the mess and immersing me in affection. Then I'd wake up and feel a dull ache in my stomach upon realizing it was just a dream. I was still jet lagged, so I spent nights wide awake with nothing to do, nothing to distract me, and sleep through most of the days. I tried reading a couple of the books I brought with me, but I couldn't go more than a few minutes without dwelling on how in love I was with her, and how utterly broken all of my hopes for the near future were. I would go down to the hotel business center a few times each day in hopes of finding some word from her, and to write emails pleading for any explanation. After a few days of nothing, I logged into my email and found a message from her, or from her address at least. The writer claimed to be her sister, claimed that Mika had some sort of panic attack in the hours before I was due to arrive and had locked herself in her room. She said that Mika was all torn up with guilt and was afraid that I'd hate her. I was so relieved to receive any communication at all from anyone. I said it was fine, and that I didn't want Mika to be upset and just begged for anyone to please come get me, and we could move past it. And then I spent a day counting the hours, counting the minutes, waiting for a response. The supposed sister said that Mika would think about it, but was feeling very conflicted. I was beside myself with frustration over being at the total mercy of this person's apparent indecision. Halfway through the week, having received no actual resolution from Mika or her sister, I found myself contemplating whether or not I should delay my flight home and keep enduring the nightmare in some hope of salvaging this stillborn relationship. And whenever I'd get close to resolving myself to let it go, I'd receive another email explaining how Mika still cared for me and just didn't know what to do. I did not extend my stay. A couple of days before my flight home, I managed to drag myself out of the hotel and decided to go tour Vatican City. I got a taxi to take me there, and when the driver recognized that I clearly wasn't local, he tried covering the meter so he could rip me off. I just got out and walked. It was an effective distraction. I loved the architecture, the art, the narrated history. Seriously, that place was amazing. I'm glad I got to see it. Afterward, I spent the remaining 2 days in a state of surreal depression and emotional exhaustion. I tried to sleep away as many of the hours as I could, so desperately eager to get home, to get back to anything remotely familiar and comfortable. I was desperate to get back to people that I knew were real. There, in that hotel room on the other side of the world, my head was spinning with the unavoidable truth that she wasn't real. She would never be real. We were never going to have a future together because there wasn't truly anyone there for me to have it with. It's hard to know how much context to include in order to convey not only the magnitude of the sense of betrayal, but also just how much it fucked with my own perception of reality. Even as I was literally counting the minutes before I could get on the plane to go home and put all of it behind me, a part of me was anxiously hoping she'd show up to stop me, right up to the moment where I stepped onto the plane. I can't describe the mental and emotional exhaustion I felt as I got home. I'd scheduled 2 weeks of leave from work, and I used that second week when I got home to just bask in everything around me that I knew to be familiar and real. I pretty much completely withdrew from online friendships. The notion of them making me nauseous like the scent of liquor makes you nauseous after an awful hangover. A couple of weeks later, she reached out to me to apologize and made a half-hearted effort at some convoluted explanation, but I just didn't really care anymore. I was so shell-shocked emotionally that, as much as I desired the illusory persona of her, there just wasn't anything left in me for her to tap into. We'd have off-and-on conversations, but for whatever her efforts to inject some warmth or affection into them to lull me back into some state of endearment, I'd start asking her how she could have done what she did to me. She'd try again to apologize, but would quickly get irritated with me for pressing her on it and vanish. Eventually, she just stopped trying. I still couldn't understand why she was trying to begin with. Over time, I grew numb to it, and the open wound scarred over. My resentment toward her faded as I put things onto perspective. I came to value the experience. Every few years afterward, she'd write to me, and we'd have a brief email exchange before receding back into our separate realities. Mika. From a 2014 correspondence with her, me. On a side note, I stuck your most recent email address into Skype and the name Christine J came up. It made me grin. Her. Ha ha, no comment. Though you must know by now, she was perhaps the most impactful fiction I'd ever read. The depth of the fantasy that she led me to engage in, at a time when I was fortunately naive enough to follow her persona into it, resonated with me for all of my life since. It truly changed the way that I view and approach people in general, the way that I approach reality, alleviated me of my foolish need for trust. In a way, I am grateful for having encountered her. In a different way, I've mythologized her in my own mind. Realistically, she was just a young girl having some fun drawing a naive older guy through her illusion, and probably not knowing how to maintain it as I pushed harder and harder for things to be real. But whatever the reality of her, she had a remarkable impact on me, and has always remained a mysterious figure in my life. Story number 11, Dumpster Dive for Blanky. So, my daughter was little, maybe 6 or 7. I was working on my food truck selling tacos on a Saturday night. I'm driving home at about 2:30 a.m. and my wife calls. This is never good. She tells me that my kid lost Blanky, and probably at a rest stop in New Hampshire. Grandparents live in NH. Kids were going up for the weekend. Halfway point, Grandma picked them up and they were off. Bathroom freak, and she refuses to leave Blanky in the car. An hour later, they exclaim that they can't find him and they left him at the bathroom rest stop. All calls were made to the place and no Blanky was visible. Blanky was lost once before and it was bad. I mean bad. Weeks of crying, sleepless, distraught. Now I come in. I'm a committed dad who likes terrible problems to solve. I get the call from my wife about the incident mainly so I can calm down and not react. That's not me. I immediately go into action with maps and time charts to figure the exact convenience store gas station they stopped at. Got it. It's a Saturday night on a holiday weekend. No trash removal for 2 days, and I know they use clear trash bags. It's a 2-hour drive to the place, but that's fine because not on my watch. I get home at 3 a.m., have a glass of whiskey, solidify my plan, and go to bed. Up at 6, my wife is a sleeper. I'm already at the store by 8 a.m. It's raining. I ask the staff all the questions. All the questions. I check the trash cans, the bathroom, nothing. I'm finally like, dumpster, I know he's here. I walk over, open the side door of the dumpster, and there he is, in a bag by himself, all alone, clean. I drove home like a superhero, Blanky in the passenger seat like Butch and Sundance. Story number 12. My mom and dad live by a pier, so the ocean is basically right beyond their backyard. One day they noticed a swan couple had started frequenting the calm water by the pier, and my mom started throwing some bread their way every now and then. A few months go by, and now they notice that the swan couple have brought a squad of baby swans with them. My mom is enamored with the small swan family, and she is now feeding them on a regular basis. A couple of years pass by, but every year the swans return. By now, some seagulls have realized that there is some free food up for grabs, and every time my mom feeds the swans, the seagulls try and swoop in to steal the offered bread. Much to my mom's dismay, the seagulls are successful in their thievery about half the time. More years go by and always the swans return. When I visit my parents, they will sometimes give me updates, like if the couple have new baby swans or whatnot. Yesterday I was over at my parents and we notice a seagull sitting on a lamppost. I ask if the seagulls still steal bread from the swans, and my mom scoffs and shakes her head. She tells me how the other day she was out feeding the swans like usual, and like always the seagulls are up to their antics. A seagull swoops down to catch a slice of bread, just before one of the swans was about to gobble it up. The seagull snatches the bread, but he is too slow. One of the swans is able to grab a hold of his wing. The other swan catches up and grabs the other wing. They start pulling. My mom is yelling at them to stop. She claps her hands loudly. She throws more bread, but the swan couple ignore her. I'm guessing swans are quite strong because eventually they tear the seagull in two. My mom said it was a horrible sight to witness. I am not going to feed them anymore, my mom finally says. Never again. Story number 13. I have a problematic father. My father was always a memorable character. When I was very young, he was showing me videos and explaining in detail how babies were made. When I was 7, he convinced me to ask my mom for a sister and plan her birth. Maybe that's the reason why I grew up as a pervert. He was hitting me from time to time, early in my life. I almost always had long hair. I liked it a lot. And when I was 12, I had a weird urge to pull it out from one single spot. It resulted in a bald spot on my head, and my father decided to shave me bald, convincing that my hair would grow better like that. I hated him even more. I spent most of summer inside the house, and when my mom wanted me to go outside, I wrapped a headband around my head. In September, it was kind of an appropriate length. Later that year, at 30th of December, I told him that I will call him father instead of dad from now on. It made him angry, so he started throwing things at me. And when he threw a lid from a pot, he injured me. To this day, a scar over my right eye is visible. The next year, during spring, I started answering with F***KU instead of no. And when I refused to walk the dog in rain, he has beaten me up and forced to apologize. The shirt was so dirty that after a few months of washing, it wasn't yet fully clean, so we got rid of it. He left me on a street and told to get back home on my own 5 times. He wasn't angry at the time. He was legit expecting a 8, 10-year-old to return home on his own from an unknown place. And finally, he had a brother that died in a psychiatry clinic, so he decided to turn to Scientology. That's where he met my mother. After I was born, he was forcing me to go on some courses. I passed 2, I think. Don't remember any of it. And when he signed me up for another one, some woman was asking me weird questions for a personality test. I got bored, so I decided to joke around with her. She didn't like it and told her boss about it. Her boss told me that I'm not going to participate if I don't want to. I didn't want to, so I called my father and told him about that. He shouted at me, telling me to want it. I started crying and didn't go anywhere. Now he's not forcing me into Scientology, but does force his mother and my younger sister. This summer, he was in South Africa, studying Scientology or SMTF. He got promoted to clear and now wears Scientology clothes, putted Scientology stuff around the house, and so on. Last year, he divorced with my mom, just so she doesn't get his stuff when he dies or snuff them 16 right now, and just wanted to share my story. I feel like I'm weird, not in black sheep or dead inside way. I feel like I might have a mental disorder, but I can't even check. Maybe I just want attention, I don't know. Story number 14. Friend of mine had an old elementary school classmate, not best friend. Find her address and wrote her a 7-page letter. Non-fiction. I wish this was fake, but holy fuck was it incredible. A friend, 24F of mine, just opened up her mail to find a 7-page letter from some random classmate from 3rd grade. After 3rd grade, she moved and went to a different school, has lived in different places, and yet somehow this dude managed to find her address and write her an insane letter talking about how desperately he needs her to remember him and how badly he wants to reconnect. It's mental. He lists off so many specific instances of things that happened in school. He calls out both of her siblings by name and incessantly, repeatedly yearns for her to remember who he is and that this isn't weird, but life's about taking risks. He remembered her birthday and background of her iPad she had. It was such an incredibly bad written letter, too. I think at one point when mentioning her birthday, that he remembered, he wrote the word birthday 7 times in 5 sentences. The entire first and second page could have been summed up in 4 sentences, and the whole letter could have been 2 pages at max. It was also riddled with spelling errors and sloppy mistakes. I cannot for the life of me think why someone would think this is okay in any scenario, El Mao. She has almost no memory of the dude. They weren't best friends. They weren't lifelong friends. They were classmates for a year, and the situations he described in crazy detail. She vaguely remembers the situations, but not him at all. If you're that desperate, hop on Tinder. Stalking a woman and writing out 7 pages is insane behavior, and she's absolutely terrified on what to do and feels like she definitely has heard noises outside her house. Luckily, she lives with family. I mentioned that maybe putting his envelope into another and sending it back with a note, saying, "I'm sorry, this is a different person," etc. might be smart, but that might encourage him to keep stalking her and sending another letter, or finding a different way to contact her. Doing nothing runs the risk that now he knows where she lives and will try to stalk her. Not opening it in RTS, it would have been great, but how could anyone know what that letter was gonna be, LOL? People be crazy. Story number 16. I got expelled for 3 different reasons from one of the world's best business schools. I'm not gonna say what it specifically is, but it's in Switzerland. If you know it, you know it. I'm from Australia, so I had never seen in the school in person, only photos. And from all the information we were getting, it was going to be an incredible school. But it turned out it was complete bullshit. It was extremely expensive, and I unfortunately got sick since I was in a new continent and my body was adjusting. And this university is not like your American colleges. Classes are Monday, Friday, and 9-6 on some days. And because I was sick, I missed lots of classes. But I also had a roommate that I became good friends with. And on the 4th week of school, I was sick, and he decided to fake being sick with me for the week. Then after that, whenever either of us took a day off, the other had to swell. We kind of strayed away from that near the end of the semester, but he essentially had the same amount of obscenes. And you can only have so many ASBCNEs in a semester, which is 60 hours of classes. With 2 weeks left in school, we both got a warning saying we will have exceeded the amount of absences if we skip any more class. Unfortunately, we accidentally missed class because we came home drunk and passed out. So we stayed in our rooms for a few days, only going to the cafeteria when the teachers weren't there. We had already smoked weed regularly, but we decided to do it in the room on campus, which was not allowed. We usually did it outside of the school or in a car and walked in high. Funnily enough, we got caught that night. I was smoking a cigar, and my friend was finishing the joint when the security came in, and it was funny as shit ever. Anyway, the next day the teachers come to our room, which they had never came before, tell us to go see the principal. He then sent us to the rooms lady. We had a drug test, and of course we were positive we smoked right before the test. So, while standing in the principal of the school, he expelled us for 3 reasons: drugs, smoking in the room, and missing classes. Legit the funniest shit ever, but because this school is more focused on money than quality, they let both of us back in. So now I'm stranded in Australia until next year when the next semester starts, but my friend has gone fuck this shit and left completely. Story number 17. This kid threw a massive tantrum at the mall, causing a huge scene. A few years ago, I was at this large mall near my city, and I noticed this plump, blonde-haired boy, he looked about 10, 11 years old, throwing this huge temper tantrum, screaming and screeching almost like a pterodactyl. He was with his mom, a short, plump woman, and younger brother, maybe 6, 7 years old, who looked just like him, only shorter. And they were coming out of a Peppa Pig World of Play center in the mall. I have no idea what the kid was upset about, but his face was really red, and he was just making these indeterminate screeching sounds. Anyway, it escalated to the point where a mall security guard had to intervene. The security guard was this young guy, maybe late 20s, and he was so nice and polite. He told the boy, "No, I'm not mad at you. I just want to talk to you." But of course the kid didn't use any actual words in response, just continued his petulant, high-pitched screaming of "Rah, rah!" The guy just couldn't reason with him. By this point, a large circle of people were surrounding them, so the security guard had to escort the 3 of them out of the mall. He escorted them through the mall's movie theater since that's where the nearest exit was. But as they made their way out, the screaming kid ran up to the ticket booth and pushed the computer cash register off the counter and to the floor. The security guard just looked disappointed and shook his head as he patiently continued escorting the kid's mom and little brother through the theater. But then the kid ran over to the concession stands and knocked those computers off the counters as well. Then suddenly the little brother started screaming, crying in the same way. And now both kids were throwing a tantrum. All hell had broken loose. The mom looked so helpless and embarrassed. Sure enough, they were finally escorted out the mall. I know many of you will point this out, but yes, I figured the kid was on the autism spectrum. I realized that pretty much from the beginning. That said, I'm not insensitive towards kids with developmental disabilities. While his mom could have at least prevented him from knocking the computers down, I still felt bad for her. By the look on her face, it looked like just a regular occurrence for them. That's gotta be rough.